Ever wondered why your React app doesn't automatically update when your data changes? Or how to make something happen every time a component loads or updates? That's exactly what useEffect does. And today, I'm going to show you how to truly master it. What's up everyone? It's Daniel here. And in this video, I'm breaking down one of the most misunderstood yet essential React hooks, the useEffect. By the end of this tutorial, you should learn what is useEffect, and you're also going to look at 5 real-world examples and also its syntax. Without further ado, let us dive in. Great. The next thing we want to do, you can just search for React and click on installation here. So we want to know which is the best platform to actually test our hook. Great. Now when you click, you can see we have create a React app and we have some recommended frameworks. Great. I can click on it. And as you can see, Next.js is the first recommended framework. Great job. The next thing we need to do is actually move inside our browser again, and you can search for Next.js. You can just click on it, and it has actually given us a guideline or a command for us to use to install Next.js. You can copy this command, and then before we use this command, we need to define our working directory. Great. You can just create an empty folder and name it useEffect, then drag and drop inside your Visual Studio Code. Beautiful. And then you can just click on this bar here and then terminal, then new terminal. Great job. The next thing you want to do is paste the exact command, npx create-next app at latest, and then a space and a /. After doing that, you can see that we are using the version of 15.5.5. Great job. You can select TypeScript and you can just leave the rest as default. Beautiful. After doing that, you can see that we have the success message here. We have the success message here that Next.js has been installed successfully. Great job. The next thing we want to do is just type npm run dev. Great job. Now the next thing, after typing npm run dev, we can see that our application is running on localhost 3000, which is beautiful. Before we check it on browser, you can just move inside your project. We can see we have the name of the folder that you have created, useEffect, and you can see we also have some folders and functions that have been created for us. Now you need to move directly inside your app directory and then click on page.tsx. This is our home page. And when you do that, you're going to see this. Let me close this. You're going to see this. Therefore, you need to collapse this div and also remove anything else. So we can just remove even the image here because we do not need it. I'm also going to delete this div so that we can have our own div. Great job. And we can have a h1, and we can say this is just a h1, a heading, and we can say this is useEffect tutorial. Great job. And then you can just save this, ensure you save, and we need to navigate towards localhost 3000. Beautiful. And you can see that we have useEffect tutorial. That means we are finished setting up our project. First, let us have a look at the syntax of useEffect. Great. The syntax of useEffect looks like this. But before we look at the syntax, we need to first declare this function as useClient. So in Next.js, whenever you're working with React hooks, you have to declare that specific page as useClient. The next thing, we need just to import the useEffect. If we can just say import useEffect. Great job. I'm going to just move this one down a bit, and then we can call useEffect. So we can just do useEffect. Great. And inside it, we're going to have an arrow function. So you can just do an arrow function like this with curly braces. Beautiful. And inside the function, what we're going to have inside is the side effect. So what is side effect? Let's say you are fetching data. You're going to actually fetch data inside the useEffect here. Or let's say you have a subscription. You're going to manage a subscription inside here, inside the useEffect. And other things like updating the DOM, even setting timers, etc. Great. Now you can just say this is the side effect. And just below the side effect, you're going to have an optional function, which is going to be the cleanup function, which is also going to be an arrow function. So you can just do an arrow function like that. Great. And inside it, you can just say, this is the cleanup code. Beautiful. Now, before we close these curly braces, and not actually that one, this one here for the use effect, we can just provide something else which is optional, known as dependencies. So you can just dependencies, which can be a single array or multiple array. Great. Let me just provide a comment so that it can become easier to understand. And this is it. This is the syntax of use effect. Inside the use effect, we have the side effect, which can be, let's say, manipulating the DOM, subscription, or timers, etc. And then we also have another optional function, which is a cleanup code. Great job. And finally, we're also going to have the dependencies. So dependencies is something, let's say you want this use effect to run every time data has changed or a timer has changed, something like that. You are going to place that dependencies here. But don't worry, in this tutorial, we're actually going to see how to use these dependencies, and we're also going to see how to actually use the cleanup code. Beautiful. Great. Now, the first function that we want to test, or the first example, is very simple. I want, whenever this page runs, or whenever this page mounts, we can have a message here. So we can just say console.log. You can even say, page is mounted, like that. Great job. You can save. Now we need to move inside our browser. Nothing has changed really, which is okay, but let us move inside more tools. You can click on more tools, then developer tools, and then just click on the console. I'm going to refresh this. Beautiful. And you can see we have pages mounted. That means whenever this page is called, we're actually going to get this message, page is mounted. So before any time a page is called, you can have a function that run or something like that. That has been the first example. Let us have a look at our second example. In the second example, we're going to see how useEffect can be used to fetch data with a real-world example. And this is the most common use of useEffect. I'm going to clean up the code, but I don't think there's too much to be cleaned. So therefore, you can just click on this. Great. For us to test the functionality of fetching data, we also need another tool, which is going to be the useState, another hook. Great. And in this example, let us see how we can fetch posts. So we can declare a variable that is going to hold the posts. Therefore, we can just say posts, and a function that is going to set the post. If we can just say set posts, like that. Great. And you're going to use useState. So at the end, you can provide a useState and also the type. So if we can just say useState, like that, and also the initial value. So the initial value is going to be null. And since you're working with TypeScript, you can also provide the type. So for this, I can just say any, because I don't know the shape of the post. Great job. The next thing we need to do, we need to declare a function inside the useEffect that is going to fetch the data or the post that we're going to work with. Therefore, you just need to move inside useEffect, just below this comment side effect. You can declare a function, and we're going to call that function fetch posts. Simple as that. And it's going to be an asynchronous function. So you can just say asynchronous function, and also it's going to be an arrow function. All right, inside this fetch post function, we can declare a variable known as response, or just in short, you can call it res. And we're going to say is equals to await, and we're going to use it to fetch the data. So you can use the inbuilt React function fetch. And at this moment, I'm just going to pass in / as the URL. We're going to change the URL later. We're also going to have another variable, and I'm going to call that variable data, and it's going to actually hold the post that we have, or store the post that you're going to get from the URL. If we can just say await response.json. Great job. And finally, since now that we have this data, we can actually use this function set posts and pass in the data. So you can just say set posts, and inside it you can pass the data that we are receiving. Beautiful. And then finally, we need to call this function. So ensure that you're outside these curly braces, and just below it, we can just call this function, which is fetch post. Great job. In this tutorial, we're not going to have a cleanup code. Therefore, you can just leave it like this. You can even delete it if you want, but I'm just going to leave it like that. Great. You can just come here below this div, and we're going to have another h2 tag, and we can say this one is fetching data example. So you can just say fetching data example. And finally, we can have some conditions. We can check whether we have posts. Now, if we have posts, we can show the posts. If we don't have, we can do something else. So inside this is actually the ternary operator, and inside it we can have a div like this, the normal HTML div. But first, let me just drop it down like that so that we can have a div. And also in the second hand side, we are going to also have a div, another division. So let me just have another div like that. Beautiful. So what does this mean? These conditions mean if it is true, we're going to run this condition 1. So let me just explain in simple terms. If we are having posts, we're going to run condition 1. If we don't have the posts, we can run condition 2. Let's say condition 2 here. And that's how you use the ternary operator in React. Great. Now, what is condition 1? If we have it, we can actually show the posts. So you can even say here, show posts. And if we don't have it, we can, let's say, just say, if we don't have it, we can say loading. Simple as that. The URL that we're going to use to fetch data is actually this one here. So you can see we have JSON placeholder like this. So this URL provides a free JSON placeholder. Great. Therefore, I'm going to copy this URL, and then I'm going to place it in our code. So you can have it here. So you can replace here. You need to replace this / with the URL that we have. Great. Which is HTTP JSON placeholder. Yeah, like this one here. Great job. And then you need to save. I'm going to provide this URL in the description so that you can actually get it. Beautiful. We are using this URL just to test data fetching. Great job. Now, there's something else that we need to do. Let us inspect this URL. You need to go back inside your browser. You can paste the URL inside your browser. Then you can just search it. And if you do it, you're actually going to see this. Let me zoom it out. Great. You can see that this URL gives us some data, which is the user ID, the ID, title, body. Nice. Now that we know it's going to return this, we can move back inside our code and we can do something. So instead of showing the post, I'm going to delete this. I can actually say post.id because I know it's there. Another thing, so you can say inside the post.id, we can actually put it inside a p tag. Therefore, I can cut this and just place it inside a p tag. And before showing the post.id, I can say that the ID of the post is great. And the next thing we can do, we can even have a h1 tag here, and we can say post.title. We can show the title and show you it's inside curly braces. You can say post.title. Beautiful. What other thing do we have? We also have the user ID. If you can check back inside your browser, you can see we also have the user ID. Therefore, you can just say post.userID. So you can put it inside the h2 tag and just pass the user ID, post.userID. Great. And finally, we're going to have, let's have a h3 tag, and we can even say post.body. Great job. Now, let me just provide some description. Inside the post.title, I can say the title of the post is, And I can also do the same. This one will be the user ID is great. And finally, we can say the body is beautiful. I'm going to save this, and we can just move back inside the application and check it. Great. Beautiful. Now you can see this is useEffect tutorial fetching data example, and you can see the ID of the post is 1, the title of the post is this. We also have the user ID is 1, and this is the body. That means we are fetching data successfully. You can actually style this with Tailwind, but this tutorial is just barely to understand useEffect tutorial. Great. We can move into the third example. In this third example, we're going to look at how to manipulate the DOM using useEffect. If I'm going to delete this because we do not need this, if you can delete all these conditions inside this div. Great. Now that we have this one is not fetching data example, we can actually say it's manipulating the DOM. Manipulating the DOM. Great. And I'm also going to delete this, the fetch posts, because we are not going to use it, and also the posts because we do not need it. In this third tutorial, we're going to see how we can calculate the window or the size of our screen. Great. Let us see how we can do that. We're going to declare a variable that is going to hold the size of the width, and we can just call it the width. So we can say width, and a function to set the width. If we can say set width, ensure that width starts with capital, set width. Great. And we're going to use useState. And finally, we're going to provide a value, which is the value of the width, which is an initial value of 0. Great job. And since we're working with TypeScript, we can even provide the type, which is just a number. Great job. Now we need to move inside useEffect and declare a function that is going to handle or even set the width. So we can do this. We're going to call the function handle resize. So you can just do handle resize. It's going to be an arrow function. And inside this function, we're going to call this function set width. Great. And we're going to pass a value to the width. So we can use an inbuilt function known as window.innerWidth. This function will calculate the width of the window. The next thing we need to do is we need to add an event listener. So you can just do this window.add event listener, and we need to be very specific. What kind of event listener are we adding? So it's a resize. Great. So whenever we resize, we need to actually calculate the window size, and another argument is going to be the function. So the function that we're going to pass is handle resize, like that. Great. And finally, we need to call this function here. So we can call the function handle resize here. Great. Very simple. We have declared a function that is going to set the width. We have added an event listener, and finally we have just called the function. Since we have added an event listener, whenever you add an event listener, you need to also clean up the event listener. Therefore, inside this return function here, we are going to provide a cleanup function. So we can actually just need to do something very simple and say window.remove event listener, like that. And we're also going to pass the same arguments, which is resize whenever we resize, and the function itself, which is handle resize. Beautiful. And we are done. And then inside this div here, we can just show the window size. So you can just show inside a p tag and say the window size is great. And then we can just say the width. We can pass the width like that. Beautiful. So you can just do it like that. And then we need to save this. And then we need to move back inside our application. Beautiful. You can see we have useEffect tutorial manipulating the DOM, and this is the window size is 679. Let us see, whenever we resize, this value needs to change. So this value is going to be different depending on the size of your computer or the size of your screen. Great. I'm going to resize this. perfect, and you can see the value is changing. Whenever we resize, let me just resize, and you can see the value keeps on changing. This is beautiful. That means we can manipulate the DOM or even calculate the width just using useEffect. In the next example, we are also going to see how we can manipulate or even change the title using useEffect. In this fourth example, we're going to see how we can change the title of our project. This one here, every time we hit a button. So as you can see at the moment, the title is Create Next React App or Create Next App. Great. Let us see how we can change it. I'm going to clean up the code. Therefore, we can just delete this part, the size of the window, and this time it's manipulating the DOM and changing title. So you can add that. Beautiful. The next thing we need to do, we need to delete these functions here inside the useEffect, and also this function here. Great job. Let us remain with useState, because you're going to, whenever we increment a value, we are going to use useState to store the exact value. Beautiful. Now, this is how this example is going to be. We're going to have a button, and whenever we click the button, it's going to increment a count. And whenever we increment the count, we're going to change the title to be that of the specific count. Let us see it in action so that you can even understand it further. We're going to first declare a variable, and you're going to call it count, and a function to set the count. So you can say set count, and we're going to use useState, and the initial value is going to be 0. Since you're working with TypeScript, you can provide a type here, which is type of number. Great. And inside the useEffect, we can do something very simple. We can get the title. So we can just say document.title, and we are going to assign it to something. So we can assign it to the count. Therefore, we can just need to use backticks, and inside it, you can even say count is, and you're going to pass in the count. You can use curly braces, and inside it, you can just use the count. Great job. Now that we have the count is, that means the title is going to change every time we do this. Beautiful. And just below here, we're going to have another function, or rather a button, not a function. We're going to have a button, and you can even say increment like that. Great. And inside it, we're going to have an onClick. So we can just pass an onClick, which is going to be a function that is called whenever this button is clicked. Inside the onClick, we can have an arrow function. So I can show you have an arrow function like that. And inside the arrow function, we're going to call another function, which is the setCount. So we need to update the count. So how are we going to update it? We're going to take the initial count and then increment by 1. Great. Since we are performing an addition operation. Beautiful. So we need to navigate back inside our browser, and we can see useEffect manipulating the DOM and changing the title, and we have this increment button here. Beautiful. And one thing we can notice is that we have the count is 0. You can see it has actually changed the title. Let me increase and see. So I can click increment. Great. When we move back inside our browser, when we click this button here, you can see that nothing is going to happen. Why is nothing happening? Great. That means we have not actually placed a very important dependencies. Now, what is a dependency? A dependency is something that allows useEffect to run more than once. For example, let's say you have data coming in. That means whenever there is data, you also want this useEffect to be called. Therefore, you just need to provide data inside the dependencies here. Great. That means we need to provide, whenever count changes, we need to provide it here as our dependencies. So you can just save this. Now that we have count inside the dependencies, we can even increment the button. When we move back inside our browser, let us click on increment. Beautiful. You can see the count is 1. I'm going to click again. The count is 2. That is beautiful. Optionally, you can even add something else here. So you can just move here before the button. You can even provide the value of count. can say the count is, and then you can just pass the value of count inside here. This one is optional and you need to save this. Great job. And when we move back, we can see the count is 3. Let me increase it again. You can see the count is 4, and the same is shown here. The count is 4. That is beautiful. That means we can just change the title of our project using this count or using useEffect. Great job. In the fifth and final example, we are going to actually see how useEffect can be used with timers and intervals. Great. Therefore, I'm going to delete this. Let me just delete this. So this is useEffect tutorial 5, and you can say it's manipulating the DOM. So we can see in this example, we're going to actually see how we can change the timer. So we can just say change this h2 to changing. Okay, we can change h2 to working with timers. So working with timers and intervals. Great. So in this fifth example, we're going to work with timers and intervals. We also need to delete this. I'm going to delete this and also this here because we do not need it. Beautiful. And we also need to delete the count here. Great job. Now in this final example, we're going to work with something known as message. We need to show the message, which is the exact timeout. But first, let us see it in action. So we need to say declare a variable, and we're going to call it message. Therefore, we just need to do this constant message and a function to set the message. So you can say set message, and finally we're going to use useState, and we need to provide the initial message, which can be waiting. You can even say waiting like this. Great job. And inside our useEffect, we're going to define a function that is going to be called once whenever we run this project. So you can say constant timer, and we're going to use an inbuilt function known as setTimeout. Great. And you can see I have a suggestion which is correct. You have the setTimeout. We can pass the function inside here and the value of timeout here. So the value of the timeout, I want the timeout to be a value of 3 seconds. So 3 seconds is approximately 3000. You can do it like that. And then inside here, we're going to have another function which is set message. So this is the function that is going to be called, and we're going to pass the message like this. So you can say inside set message, you can set the message is hello after 3 seconds. Beautiful. Now you can even say hello after 3 seconds. You can even say hello after 5 seconds, and then you can change this value to 5, but I'm going to stick with 3. So it's hello after 3 seconds. Beautiful. And then finally, I want to show the message here. So just below this h2, we can just show the message inside curly braces. Ensure you save, and let us have a look inside our browser. All right, so we have useEffect tutorial working with timers and intervals. Let me refresh this, and you can see waiting, and after 3 seconds, boom, we have hello after 3 seconds. That has been the last tutorial on useEffect. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have not subscribed, please do, and see you in the next one. You can also tell me the project that you would wish to see next inside the comments. Yeah, and also in case you have questions, you can just ask me directly inside the comments section. And also ensure that you like these videos so that it can also reach other developers.